Welcome back to the stream. Today we're going to be doing a EDH or Commander deck construction stream with my friend here, Nick.
Hello.
He was here for the War of the Spark unboxing, which was a great old stream. I had a lot of fun with that stream, and today we are going to be building a Commander deck around Niv-Mizzet Reborn. Go ahead and explain what he does.
Alright, Niv-Mizzet Reborn is what's called a Wooburg creature. It costs white, blue, black, red, green. Cut it down, it's Wooburg. It's one of each color for a 6/6 legendary dragon avatar. It has flying, like most dragons do, but more importantly, when he enters the battlefield, you reveal the top 10 cards of your library. And for each color pair, you can choose a card that is exactly 2 colors and put those in your hand for each color pair. So there's 10 color pairs. For those that play Magic, it corresponds to the guilds of Ravnica. So any of the guilds, effectively, you can put a multicolored card that's exactly those colors into your hand. The rest go on your bottom of the library in a random order. You cannot use this to cheat out 3 or 4 or 5 colored cards, as they have to be exactly those 2 colors, which has some interesting deck restriction requirements.
Yes, the deck restrictions can be kind of brutal at times, but 2 colors is not hard to work around.
Yeah, but every 2 colors?
Yeah, that's pretty tough.
Okay, so as far as the actual deck construction, you generally want to have an idea of what your deck is going to do. Kind of like a company motto. Niv-Mizzet's the CEO, and his motto is to draw as many cards as possible and eat your face. The deck I put together is focused mostly on getting commander damage set together, having a glut of 2 colored cards, and a little bit of recursion for if any of the stuff that I would use to make Niv-Mizzet bigger goes away. In Commander, a player will die regardless of their life total when they've taken 21 points of commander damage. Niv-Mizzet is a 6/6, which means to make that happen I have to hit you 4 times. But if I can give him just a measly +1, it cuts it down to 3 times. So there's a lot of things in the deck that do that.
Right. So we're going to go ahead and start looking at the cards that he has done, and I have set up a handy-dandy sheet. So the first card in our list is the Skyblinder's Staff.
The list is set by converted mana cost, how much it costs in total first. So it's going to kind of go around a little randomly. Forgive me. The Skyblinder's Staff is for the commander damage victory. You'll notice it doesn't have any colored mana in its cost, so I have to draw this one normally. But it gives Niv-Mizzet the extra +1 power that he needs, and makes it so that he cannot be blocked by creatures that fly. You will notice Niv-Mizzet currently flies. This means the only way you could be able to block him is with something that has reach. So I think it's a pretty good way to get damage in and take care of stuff. It's generally one of my favorites for any commander that's got flying.
That makes a lot of sense, actually. I saw that card and I was like, that seems kind of steep to equip it, but then I thought about the commander and I was like, he's going to possibly plan on putting an additional point of power on him and hitting you 3 times with him.
And that'll get the game done. And because it's an equipment, if Niv-Mizzet happens to die, because, not being able to block a 7/6 dragon all the time is kind of steep, then I just play him again, and I get to put the equipment back on if they don't get rid of it. So it's reusable as well.
Yes. Next up in our list is a card called Wayfarer's Bauble.
This, again, is an artifact, but this one in particular is for getting out lands that I need. One of about the 4 major things you need in pretty much every commander deck is a way to get extra mana, a way to get extra cards, a way to deal with problem permanents, and a way to reset the board. This one falls under the way to get extra mana section. It's 1 to put into play, it's 2 to sack it, and I can get any basic land. Now, in a deck like this, I don't have a lot of basics, but there's still 10, so it's generally always got a target.
Yep. And it can be generally useful whenever. It can be useful in the late game. You generally don't want to draw it late, though. You want to draw it as early as possible, but just sometimes getting that 1 extra land can win you a game.
Yes, it can. And since it's not an activated ability, I can do it at the end of my opponent's turn and have the land effectively untapped for my turn.
Yes. Next up, we have Marchesa's Smuggler.
Now we're finally getting into cards that have mana cost on it. This one is blue and red, which is part of the Izzet Guild, but this card is not from Ravnica. And primarily, it's got Dethrone, so whenever it attacks, whoever has the highest life total at the time, I get to put a +1/+1 counter on it. But more importantly, its activated ability. Again, I consider this part of my commander's Eat Your Face Off strategy. For one, a blue and a red, I can choose any creature I control to give it haste, and it cannot be blocked by anybody. So if I happen to have 8 mana when Niv-Mizzet hits the board, and 2 of it are red and blue, I can give him haste and start eating face early.
Yes. Because we have already determined that haste is likely the strongest keyword.
It does get the job done.
It does. Next up, we have Fists of the Demigod.
Okay, this one's kind of an odd include for the most part, because it requires the creature to be those 2 specific colors, and as we get through the deck, you'll realize that I don't think I have any creatures, actually, that are that set of colors. But again, this goes on my commander. It takes him, because Niv-Mizzet's all 5 colors, and is the only one in the deck. There's a whole cycle of these kind of enchantments from the set they're from. This one in particular gives it +1/+1 and Wither, if it's black. Wither, of course, means it deals its damage in the form of -1/-1 counters, and then +1 in first strike if it's red. Wither in first strike is really useful, so I can hit your creature first, make it really tiny, and then not get hit back for much at all.
That makes sense. It also kind of helps protect Niv-Mizzet from any potential big blockers. Like if someone's being cheeky and somehow could block it with an Ulamog that's indestructible, that hits it first and stops it from being able to kill it back.
And now your big scary Ulamog is a 3/3.
Yes.
The other thing that's really important, I think, here...
It'd be a 2/2.
Okay, the Ulamog would be a 2/2. But, as far as this card is concerned, it's a 2-colored card that only requires 1 colored mana to cast.
Yes.
So if I'm in a bit of a bind and I need to use my mana for other things, this is a lot easier to cast than an actual red-black card would be.
Yes. The next card is Huatli's Raptor.
Huatli's Raptor is just a really efficient creature.
It is.
For 2 mana, you've got a 2/3 Vigilant, and when it enters the battlefield, you can proliferate. So you can put any counter that's already on somebody, or some permanent, an extra 1. And there's a few Planeswalkers in the deck, but mostly it's just really solid and really good.
Mm-hmm.
Not a lot to say about it, unfortunately.
Next up is the Simic Charm.
Charms are really good pretty much anyway. They're not as good as a single determined spell would be for that effect. For example, the first ability on this charm, target creature gets +3/+3 until end of turn. Green can get that for 1 green mana. But, because you can also do either of the other 2 abilities, giving all your permanents hexproof, or returning a creature to its owner's hand, it's worth the extra mana for the extra flexibility. And in this deck, I use it either to give stuff that I need hexproof, or I use it to bounce a creature. Generally, I'll bounce Niv-Mizzet, generally so I can play him again, and hope to draw another 10 cards.
Yes. Because drawing cards is highly important.
Indeed.
Next up is Mist Meadow Witch.
Alright, so Mist Meadow Witch, again, has the same cool casting thing that Fists of the Demigod does, where it's technically both white and blue, but I only need 1 of those mana to activate it. The other thing is that I can pay its activated ability down there for 2, a white and a blue, to just take any creature at all, not just mine, to get them out of the game, and then bring them back at the end of the turn. That works great for Niv-Mizzet, it works great for any of my opponent's blockers, any of my opponent's attackers, or anything that's got a really good comes into play ability.
Yes. Because, again, repeating the Niv-Mizzet trigger is going to be pretty important. It's going to hopefully ruin people's faces.
Yeah, it's generally the hope.
Next up is Selesnya Charm. It's just like that Simic Charm, except it has different abilities and costs different colors.
So it's not like the Simic Charm at all, really. Well, it is still an instant, and it's still 2 colors. But in this one, I can either give a creature +2/+2 and Trample. Trample is super important if I'm going to try to deal commander damage, because if I can't make him unblockable, I have to make him go over the top instead. Generally, the other ability on this that's worth playing is to exile a creature with power 5 or greater. Because if you've got that Ulamog that I'd have to try and force my way through otherwise, I can just exile it.
Yep.
The 2/2 creature isn't super important, so it's basically either do I need to have Niv-Mizzet have trample for the turn, or I need to get rid of that big thing that's stopping me.
Otherwise, you could use that in a very, very close pinch and just be like, here's a 2/2 creature to block.
Yeah.
But that would be generally the only time you pick that one.
But this is generally a removal card, is kind of how I feel about it.
Yeah, it's generally removal. Because you're dealing with someone's problematic big thing.
Exactly.
Next up is Dovin's Veto from War of the Spark. I love this card. It's an uncounterable counterspell for non-creature spells.
That's the rub. But let's face it, if I'm staring down another deck, and there's a board wipe I don't want to deal with, or there's an enchantment I don't want to deal with, or pretty much anything, I just want to be able to say no. And this not only says no, but it says no to someone trying to stop me from telling them no. It is a hard stop. The hardest stop. And it's 2 colors.
With a few exceptions. There's always a couple of exceptions, but we're not going into the exceptions.
Yeah. Generally, this is used to shut down an opponent who's trying to stop me from winning the game.
Yes. Next up is Dreadbore.
Again, more removal. I run decks that are really high on removal, generally because I'm the one who's trying to do the most stuff in a game, I find. So I need to make sure I'm well protected. And this one is just red and a black, and I blow up a creature or a planeswalker. It's a sorcery, so that's a little, unfortunate, but still. Any creature I don't like, any planeswalker I don't like, goes away. And with War of the Spark giving us an extra, 37 planeswalkers?
Yep.
It's definitely useful to be able to get rid of those.
Yeah. Planeswalker's definitely got a huge power buff because of this last set, but this card can take care of it.
Indeed.
Once. Next up is Growth Spiral, and I just like the art on this card.
It does look very pretty. It looks like someone walking into a portal made out of the Simic symbol, almost.
Yes. But it draws a card, gets ramp. It does 2 of the big things that this deck wants to do.
And for 2 mana.
And for 2 mana.
And at instant speed. So,
Yes.
End of your turn, I get more land.
Yep.
Hard to be unhappy with that.
So, next up is Coiling Oracle.
And again, Coiling Oracle is another card that costs 2 mana. And this one is either or. I either get to draw or I get the land.
Yes.
Either way, I have an extra little blocker. And with enough stuff in the deck that does the whole flicker it in and out, I can get some real advantage with this thing over the course of the game.
Yep. Next up is Zertai Druid. It's a ramper, but it also has a damage clause attached to it for each opponent whenever you tap it for mana.
Yep.
Which is actually supposed to be really good. I've heard good things about this card.
I hope to find out. Now, for a deck like this, it's generally, because I'm so heavy into all the multicolors, adding specifically green isn't as good as adding anything would be, but it still hurts everybody else, and I don't have to use the mana. It's better than attacking for that guy.
Yeah, that's way better than attacking for that guy. Next up is Thought Vessel.
So, I could go on a whole spiel about how this is a ramp card. It effectively gets me higher up in the chain, but it's colorless mana. It doesn't ramp that well. This is here primarily for no maximum hand size.
Your favorite thing on the planet.
Okay, yes, but also it's relevant in the deck because there's a good chance that whenever I cast my commander, I'm drawing 5 or 6 cards. And if I already have a hand with 3 or 4 in it, I don't want to pitch anything because I'm greedy, and that's how I like to play.
Like I said, his favorite thing on the planet.
Yeah. Pick the next card already.
Next card is It Charm? It's one of the charm cards.
Yep. These 3 abilities are counter a spell for really cheap, and not even really a hard counter. I'm not a huge fan of it, but if I can make it useful as one, that's not too bad. Or I can deal 2 damage to a creature, and there's some utility creatures that might be worth it, like if I can get rid of your Birds of Paradise or something.
Oracle of Moldiah.
Or the Oracle of Moldiah. But generally, I'm probably just going to draw 2 cards and then discard 2 cards. Because again, my artifacts, I can't steal with Niv-Mizzet. I have to naturally draw those.
Yeah.
So I've got to increase my draw triggers as well.
Then next up we have Despark. Removal.
Yep. It's removal. It's instant speed removal, which is great.
It exiles, which is really
Also
important.
great. And it's any permanent I want as long as it costs 4 or more mana to cast.
So, big stuff. generally the stuff you want to get rid of.
Almost anything. This isn't standard or modern or vintage where you win the games on 1 and 2 drops.
Yep.
And if the game is done by turn 4, okay, that's the end of it. This is Commander. This is Battleship Magic. Almost every deck has a slew of things at 4 or greater. This might as well say get rid of anything you don't like. That's not a land.
Yep. And even then, Arixmatese is a land you can cast, and it costs 4.
You know what? It kills lands too. There's no downside to this card.
It kills a single land, but still.
It kills a single anything. Let's be fair. It says target.
It does.
Just because it's only one land it can hit isn't a bad thing. Anyway, I sing its praises.
Yep. Next up is Terminate. Piece of removal. Can't be regenerated. Pretty important clause.
Well,
Actually,
it was back in the day. Back in the day, a lot of things would not allow anything to regenerate, so it didn't mean anything. Now, things are allowed to regenerate, but they don't print regenerate anymore. This is basically 1/2 of Dreadbore, but in exchange for not getting able to get rid of Planeswalkers, I can cast this at instant speed.
Yep. Next up, we have Reborn Hope.
So Reborn Hope is one of 2 cards that mainly they're in there so they can get almost anything from my graveyard to my hand. This one, luckily enough, will stick around and stay in the graveyard so if I can get it back with other stuff, I can make use of it. But yeah, it just brings back a dead thing. It's like an Eternal Witness, but it costs 2 colors so Niv-Mizzet can give it to me.
Yes. And this only gets back multicolored cards, but that's not really a restriction in this deck.
No, there's only about 10 cards I think it can't get.
And a land. But that's not important.
Lands don't count.
If you're getting back a land, you're doing something wrong.
Yeah.
Unless there's a very good reason for it. Next up is Treasured Find.
This is the other part of my super strong recursion package. This one gets anything I want, but I have to exile it.
Yep.
Other than that, it's the same as Reborn Hope.
Exactly the same. Next up is Boros Charm. So we got another of the charms. This one in particular is mostly used for the probably indestructible clause.
Yep, keeps all my stuff safe from board wipes, but also...
The double strike is also really important.
Exactly.
Because it can turn Niv-Mizzet from hitting 4 times into hitting...
Twice.
If you can give it double strike again.
Naive Archer, we are building Niv-Mizzet Reborn.
Yes.
If you want to skip up to the top so we can see what it's looking like.
Sure. Oh. Wrong spot.
Yeah.
I did not account for that.
We're still dealing with new things. Sorry, guys.
Yep.
There he is.
There he is in
My
all of
big
his
baby.
splendor.
Hopefully the peak was long enough, but if it wasn't, he's a all-colors 6/6 flying dragon that potentially draws me 10 cards when he shows up.
Yes.
So.
One of each of the guild sets.
Yep.
But.
Alright. So, Boros Charm, and it deals 4 damage to someone. The only time I'd see playing that is if someone's literally 4 damage away to die.
Or less.
Or less, but even then, keep my stuff safe and or kill you with Niv-Mizzet.
Yep.
Flexibility's good.
Next up is Baleful Strix. It is a very powerful blocker, and it gets you a card. It has flying and death touch.
In some versions of Commander kind of theory and breakdown, this type of card is called a rattlesnake. A rattlesnake basically says, don't mess with me or you will suffer. This takes anything that's attacking you, barring a very few notable exceptions, and kills it. And you get to draw a card for playing it. And, luckily for me, it costs 2 colors that are not the same.
Yes. Really great.
Free draws are good.
Next up is Rakdos Charm. There's a lot of charms in this deck.
Turns out they've learned a lot of really good ones. We went to Ravnica a couple times.
Yep.
So this one either nukes somebody's graveyard, blows up an artifact, or has creatures deal damage to their controllers. And generally with this one, I'm probably going to blow up somebody's graveyard. I've got a lot of removal, also, you may have noticed, so I have other things that takes care of artifacts. And in the very rare circumstance I saw one time, somebody got enough creatures equal to their life total and then immediately died to a Rakdos Charm. So, you know, it sticks around for that.
Yes. This is the funniest ability. The deals 1 damage to its controller. I love that clause. And I wanted to do that, but I had like 3 creatures, so it didn't do much to me.
And that's the goal.
Next up is Commander Sphere, ramp, card draw.
Nothing else really needs to be said.
Short, sweet. Next up is Hannah, Ship's Navigator. Recursion, recursion, recursion.
Oh, this is specific recursion, though.
Yes.
1, she is white and blue, which is a color pair.
Yes.
So I can draw with Niv-Mizzet. And 2, she returns artifacts or enchantments from my graveyard in my hand. There's a lot of things that deal with creatures. There's even a few more now that deal with planeswalkers. This in particular gets back artifacts that I've sacrificed to effects earlier, like Wayfarer's Bauble or Commander's Sphere, or it gets back enchantments after people blow up my commander and they fall off.
Yes. And I'd like to go ahead and say thank you for the follow, Shanders. I really appreciate your support in this. And I hope you enjoy this deck construction that we're doing with Niv-Mizzet Reborn as its commander. So next up, we have the Behemoth Sledge.
So this is, I think this might be the only card in Magic that is a multicolored equipment. So I can find it with Niv-Mizzet, and it'll stick around after Niv-Mizzet dies. Oh, and also as a side effect, it makes them get +2/+2 lifelink and trample. Minor things, really.
Minor things, you know, trample being super important in the deck.
Well, that, and again, it gives him at least 1 point of power over, so it reduces the total amount of times he needs to attack.
Yes.
And it keeps me alive. Turns out people like to kill me.
Then we have Unflinching Courage. It does the same thing as the hammer, except it's on an aura. So if Niv-Mizzet dies, that goes away.
On the plus side, though, I don't need to spend mana to equip Unflinching Courage.
True.
And that's the real trade-off. And that's the difference.
Yes. Then we have Steel of the Godhead. This is one of my favorite cards in Magic.
This is really mean. So again, it's the color pair. If it's a white creature, which again, Niv-Mizzet is, it gets +1/+1 and lifelink. But if it's blue, it gets +1/+1 and unblockable. So it makes it so that the Behemoth Sledge and the Unflinching Courage give Niv-Mizzet lifelink and trample. So if I can get through your creature, I'll deal damage and gain 8 life every turn. This just bypasses creatures entirely.
Yeah. Pretty brutal. I've won several games with this card.
It does work.
Next up we have Incubation/Incongruity.
Yep, new split cards, so everyone turn your head sideways to try and read it. You can go ahead and skip Incubation, because I'm never actually going to play that. It's mostly there for Incongruity. There were a couple cards back in the day that would exile your opponent's creatures and give them would destroy your opponent's creatures and give them a 3/3 creature. This one is the only one that's multicolor, and it exiles instead of destroys. It's just removal, and it gets rid of things I don't like.
Yes.
And turns them into 3/3s, and I can deal with 3/3s.
We can all deal with 3/3s. Next up is Saheeli, Sublime Artificer, and I think this card will be so good in Commander. That passive is so strong. Just any non-creature spell, get a dude.
Even more than just the dude, though, you can take any artifact you control, or the dude, and turn it into a copy of any other artifact, or another creature you have in play. It's still an artifact, but I have some artifacts that effectively have really great passes that are worth copying, and I have some creatures that are also worth swinging and attacking with.
Yes.
So, it works both ways, and generally, yeah, I'm probably not going to effectively roll her down, but extra blockers are extra blockers. It's hard to say no.
Yes. Very hard to say no to extra blockers. Next up is Ashiok Dream Render.
This is a trolling card. I play this card because the less my opponents get to do things, the more I can do my own things. And that seems kind of rude, but there's a finite amount of fun to be had in a game of Magic, and I want to have as much of it as I can.
I tend to disagree, but...
Well, that's fine. But while this is on the field, my opponents cannot search their library for anything. No giant ramping spells, no tutoring out the thing they need at the time, none of that. And its minus ability is also just fine. Whoever's the most dangerous takes the top 4 cards on their library, puts them in their graveyard, and then everybody's graveyard but mine goes away. This is a card that keeps you safe, and is probably going to effectively be a card that just gains me 5 life in a game.
Yep. No one's going to let that stay around. Everyone likes digging up cards out of the deck, particularly land. Land ramp is important, and that turns it off.
Yep.
Next up is Teferi Time Raveler.
And again, it's a trollier card, not going to lie. It makes it, the passive ability makes it so that my opponents can only cast spells and they can do sorcery spells. So no instant speed shenanigans. Which means effectively no counter spells. And not as many combat tricks. In fact, not any combat tricks. Because combat, you can't cast sorceries. His +1 lets me cast sorceries as though I had flash, as opposed to any of the other permanent types. But I'm going to be honest, end of turn board wipe is pretty good.
Yeah.
And then his -3 is I can return anything of a particular type of permanent to its owner's hand and draw a card. Drawing a card is good, and if I choose to bounce Niv-Mizzet because Teferi's about to die, I might draw more cards.
Yep.
Yay cards.
Yay, more cards. Next up is Dovin, Hand of Control.
So you might get the idea that I actually hate my opponents. That's not true. I just think a game should be a challenge. Dovin, Hand of Control, in addition to being one of the many 2-color cards in the deck, makes it so that 3 types of cards my opponents try to cast cost more mana to cast.
Are you sure you don't hate people? Are you sure you don't hate your opponents?
I hate when they mess with me. So I'm trying to cut down on as much of that as possible.
Okay.
And then again, his -1 is until my next turn, any permanent on the field will neither take nor receive damage. Sorry, take nor give damage. So I can put it on my stuff to have a really good blocker, or to make one of my planeswalkers effectively immune from losing its loyalty counters. Or I can do that on an opponent's thing that's really devastating.
Yes,
So,
to
he actually
prevent
does
it from smacking you in the face.
cruelly and undeservedly in the face, might I add.
Well, it depends on what you're doing at the time.
Well, if I've got a Dovin in play, it's probably deserved.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
Next up is Darksteel Ingot.
It's ramp.
It's ramp. Leyline Prowler.
It's also ramp, but if I don't need the ramp, it has Death Touch and can block well on the ground.
Yes.
I got a buddy who... There's a card similar to this, in just mono black, that has Death Touch, Lifelink, and Flying. He calls it Death Touch the Flying Lifelink monster. This does not fly, but it is Death Touch the Lifelink mana generating monster.
Yes. Next up is Gyre Sage. It ramps.
It ramps for a free 2 mana. Most mana dorks don't give you 2, and it costs 2 anyway.
Yes.
Ramp is ramp is ramp is ramp.
Yes. We love our ramp. Next up is Edric, Spymaster of Trest.
So Edric is card draw, but he's also card draw that, hopefully my opponents won't be too mad at me having, mainly because if they attack me, they don't get to draw cards with it. Otherwise, cards for everyone. See, I like my opponents.
This card says I like my opponents. Everything else so far says I absolutely hate them.
I believe that is an unfair characterization of my character.
Except for the ramp.
Yes, the ramp totally says I want to have a fun game too.
Yes. Oh boy. So next up is Selvala, Explorer Returned.
This one is also ramp and card draw and a little bit of politics. I actually think it's kind of fun to be able to tie my ramp and card draw right next to each other. So, I tap it, everyone shows me their top card. For everything that's not a land, I get extra green mana, and I get a little bit of life, and then everyone draws the cards they showed off. It's great. And if anyone's scarier than I am, everyone at the table gets to know about it.
Yes. I saw one person try to build this as a mill deck, and that was a miserable game to watch. It took 3 hours, and it took 8 turns to play that game.
Dear God. And you say I hate my opponents.
They hate them more.
Tell me about it. Good Lord.
But that is not why we're here. We're not here to discuss the Selvala mill deck.
Yeah, that might be a later episode if we're feeling particularly spiteful.
Next up we have Duragar Hedgemage.
This is just removal. And it's probably not even really great removal because I have to have 2 or more mountains or plains. But if I have either of them, I can destroy artifacts or enchantments, or if I'm really lucky, both.
Yes. I was going to say, this is a very limited card because we're not running a ton of basics. But
you're spot on there. That might be something to consider cutting.
yeah. Next up is Mortify. Piece of removal, it hits enchantments. Hitting enchantments is actually pretty important because enchantments usually win people the game.
Well, the two colors in Magic can't deal with them at all, black and red, and one color kind of deals with them, and that's blue, and that's by bouncing them and then countering them later.
Yes.
Enchantments are some of the least interactive permanent types in Magic, so being able to get rid of them is super important.
Yes. The two that can do it effectively are white and green. Hence why Mortify is part white.
Yep.
Then we have Putrefy.
Instead of enchantments, it hits artifacts, which are also good to get rid of.
Yes.
That was fast.
Yep. Counterflux. The super no counter.
So Dovin's Veto counters non-creature spells and can't be countered. This counters anything I don't control and can't be countered. I can think of very, very few circumstances where I want to counter a spell I control, unless, I'm playing a different deck.
Yeah.
But then I wouldn't control it. So, but yeah, it's just another hard counter and make sure that my plan goes down.
And very few times you'll ever want to overload it, but the overload can sometimes be extremely useful.
Yeah, if someone's casting a whole bunch of spells in one turn, like Storm or something.
Yeah, Storm decks hate this card.
With reason.
Next up is Gaze of Granite. It is a board wipe for all non-land permanents of X or less.
It's a board wipe and a scalpel. If there's a particular permanent that's, 4 mana cost and I don't want to blow up Niv-Mizzet, I can cast Gaze of Granite for 4 and leave my Niv-Mizzet alive.
Yes. Then we have Fires of Yavimaya.
Then we mentioned that haste is really good.
Yeah.
Yeah, haste is really good.
Haste is pretty darn good.
Yep.
We love haste. Has 1 games. Lots of games.
Indeed.
Next up is Comball, Console of Allocation.
Okay, so Combo, whenever my opponents play anything that's not a creature spell, they lose 2 life, and I gain 2 life. No, I don't hate my opponents. Next.
Next up is Heartwarming Redemption. A new card, and probably one of the best Boros cards we've seen in a long time.
Yeah, red and white definitely needs the help, but even this deck, I'll take it. It makes me, at instant speed, which is the important part, I pitch my hand, and then I draw that many cards plus 1, and gain that much life. The life gain is almost incidental. Doesn't really mean anything. It just, I gain the life, but I also get a fresh new grip.
Yes.
So, definite card draw. Like the card draw.
Yes, we love the card draw. Firemind Vessel, it's ramp, but it adds 2 mana of different colors to help fit the theme of this deck, so that you can cast all your 2-colored stuff.
And as far as fitting the theme of the deck, it also has Niv-Mizzet's face on it, which is hard to beat for fitting the flavor.
Yes.
But yeah, colorless ramp.
Next up is Urza's Filter.
So this is the card that, as far as I'm concerned, is actually the commander of the deck. Now, granted, it works for everybody, but I don't think everybody's going to have as many multicolored spells as I will. So not as many people are going to get the 2-mana discount on literally everything they cast.
Yeah, some of these cards you really don't want to see early.
Oh, yeah.
And you don't want to see a lot of them early. Because, being able to get some of these removal spells or some of these other things in this list are going to be ridiculous for cheaper.
And may I remind everyone who was paying attention, Saheeli making a copy of this, so my multicolored spells cost up to 4 less to cast?
Gross.
Yeah, minor details.
The only problem with this card is it is an artifact, and it has no colors, so it does not get hit by Niv-Mizzet. And if you accidentally hit it with Niv-Mizzet, it goes on the bottom.
Which is true and unfortunate.
Yes.
Alright.
So then we have the Elite Guard Mage.
He flies, he gains life, he draws cards. I think we're going to have to speed this up, otherwise we're never going to get to the end of actually doing anything else with it.
True. Next up is Utter End.
Gets rid of things, exiles. It's like D-Spark, but costs 2 more, but it can hit everything, of that 1 to 3 range as well.
Yes. Generally not hitting that 1 to 3 range. Next up is Death Sprout. It's removal and ramp, which is kind of an odd combination together. But this card will likely be a very good commander staple.
Especially because it says instant.
Yes.
That's really strong when they come into play tapped.
Next up is Joda, Archmage Eternal.
So he's 3 colors, which means Niv-Mizzet kind of waves happily by him as Niv-Mizzet comes into play. But it's a 4/3, it flies, and it allows me to play WUBRG instead of other costs for my spells. That generally doesn't work for some, but there are a few spells in here that are very prohibitive. Some of the color cards that cost 2 each of 2 different colors can be very tough to get to. So that's what he's around for.
Yes. Next up is Bruce Tarl, Boorish Herder. He gives double strike and lifelink. So survivability and killing people faster with Niv-Mizzet.
Spot on. And he also does it when he comes into play. So if I've got enough mana to flicker him real quick, well, then I don't have to worry about throwing him into the fracas.
Yep. Vanish into Memory.
This is probably the absolute slowest flicker I've seen in my life. But it gets you insane card selection if you choose the right thing. For 4 mana at instant speed, you exile any creature on the board, and then you draw cards equal to its power. At the beginning of your next upkeep, it comes back, and you discard cards equal to its toughness. Now, generally I'll be hitting Niv-Mizzet with this, and he's a 6/6, so it's not going to help a whole bunch. If I wanted to hit something that was like a 4/2, like a Flametongue Kevu, alright, I draw 4 cards and I discard 2. But even then, I get to have the best 6 cards out of whatever's in my hand and what I drew.
Yes.
And I get another free comes into play trigger.
Yep.
Or if someone cheeky has, I don't know, an Ulamog, I will draw 10 cards, it will be gone for the turn, and then later I can deal with it. That's future Nick's problem.
Yes. Future Nick's problems. Then we have Brago, King Eternal. He flickers.
Pretty much. That's what
his
he's there
purpose. He's there to flicker.
All of my flicker targets at once, anything that needs reset, any planeswalkers that have lost loyalty, Brago says, I got you covered, bruh.
You know, like that handy-dandy Saheeli getting you 2 Urza's filters.
Or, the Ashiok that people are trying to kill, and I can just set back to 5 again.
Yes. Generally, you'll be able to kill that pretty quick, though. Because one person's probably not going to be the only person hitting that.
Probably. But again, I promise I don't hate my opponents.
Fair enough. Next up is Golgari Finebroker. It gets a permanent out of the graveyard back to the hand. Pretty good card.
Yep, just good recursion. And it's one of those... This one is black, green that takes a little bit of work to try and cast consistently.
Yes.
So
that Joda would possibly help with that one.
Exactly.
But you'd be getting not a 1 mana. You'd be paying 1 more for it. But if you don't have the black, green, and you need it, then that's pretty good.
Let's face it, color fixing is a thing.
Yes.
All right.
Next up is Dragonarch.
So Dragonarch is a card that most people have forgotten about, but I'm a fan on account of the whole I get to put a multicolored creature card from my hand directly into play. So if anyone decides to bounce Niv-Mizzet, he costs 2 mana. Now, unfortunately, because it's an artifact, I have to draw it like a real card, but I also get to ignore a wide variety of the casting costs of the deck.
Yes.
So I consider it a net positive.
Yep. Farika's Mender is the next card.
Yep.
It's recursion for enchantments or creatures.
And because I have enchantments that fall off whenever Niv-Mizzet dies, I can get them back.
Yes.
Seems good to me.
Seems pretty good. Next up is Tiana, Ship's Caretaker. It returns artifacts and auras to the battlefield? Owner's hand.
Returns them to my hand. Anything that falls off, I get to get back at the end of the turn.
Yes.
And that's as long as she's on the field. So if somebody board wipes, she still sees everything die.
Yes.
Also, flying in first strike isn't bad.
Yeah, that's pretty good. I actually really like the art on this card. It's really neat art. I like the wings.
Reminds me of, like, Kaylee from Firefly as an angel.
Fair enough. Next up is Runes of the Deus.
So this is something you put on Niv-Mizzet when you're sick of the game and it needs to end soon. Because it gives him +2/+2, collectively, and trample and double strike.
Yeah, that'll end the game pretty quick.
If I can get through unblocked with that, that's 16 commander damage.
Yep. Next up is Vulture Zombie. It gets fat.
It does fly, so if I can put a Skyblinder staff on it, you're in trouble. And whenever any card goes to any opponent's graveyard from anywhere, it gets ever so slowly fatter. It just beats people to death.
It does. We have Adriana, Captain of the Guard. Hey, look, a multiplayer card.
Well, we're playing Commander. All of the cards are multiplayer cards.
True.
This one specifically, though, makes it so that whenever I attack with any creature, my creatures collectively get +X, where X is the amount of opponents I have attacked. It's kind of the short, sweet version.
Yes.
So if I'm attacking with Niv-Mizzet and 2 other opponents, Niv-Mizzet gets +3/+3. 9's a good number for a big dragon.
Yeah, 9's pretty good. Next up is Assemble the Legion. Personally, this card ends games. It is so powerful. It gets you a lot of creatures kind of fast.
Yep. There's not a lot to say about. Oh, and Niv-Mizzet can also draw it. So,
Yeah.
minor details.
Minor details. Join Shields.
This keeps me alive.
It does.
All my critters untap, so they're able to block if I'm in a combat situation where that's devastating. They also gain hexproof, so nothing can target them. They also gain indestructible, so they won't die.
Yep.
That's
Pretty
it.
good card.
That's all you need.
Privileged Position gives all your permanents hexproof.
All your other permanents.
Yes,
That's
it does not
super
give
important.
itself.
And it is also somewhat hard to cast, being as it's 3 specific colored mana, but that's any combination of green or white.
Yes.
And, of course, like all the other really good cards in the deck, Niv-Mizzet draws it.
Yes. Next up is Bring to Light. This is probably one of the best tutors in the deck.
It played properly, and again, I'm going to be trying to get to 5 mana as soon as I can of each different color. I just plan for this, and I get to find any card in the deck I want that costs 5 or less.
Creatures, instants, or sorceries.
Well, most of the cards in the deck.
Yes.
And just play them then.
Yep. It is pretty good. Next up is Prismatic Geoscope. It ramps really hard.
Rather than the Duergar Hedge Mage that requires 2 of a specific basic land to come in, this one says for each one of them that I happen to have, I can tap in and get a mana of that color.
Yep.
This is also something I want to copy with Saheeli.
Yes. Next up is Cloudblazer, one of the best creatures.
It flies, it draws cards, it gains life.
Yep.
It's good. Next.
Time wipe.
Here's a board wipe that allows me to save any creature I control.
Can anyone say Niv-Mizzet?
Well, I can. Let's save Niv-Mizzet.
Yeah, let's
and
save
blow up
Niv-Mizzet.
everything else.
Yep, that's the plan. Urban Evolution, draws cards, and ramps.
It seems a little late for most ramp spells, and to be fair, it is.
It is.
But it also draws 3 cards, and that's super strong. This just gets you back in the game.
And this doesn't necessarily ramp you. You have to have the additional land to play.
Yeah, but you also draw 3 cards. There's a good chance you're drawing into it as well.
Yeah. Obsidat's Aid, it returns a permanent to the battlefield. So it skips the whole, I'm returning it to hand. I have to replay it.
No. I'm casting it for 5 and just putting it back.
Yep.
And there's a lot of things in here that are worth doing that too.
Yep. Rolazak?
Roalesque, I think.
Rolesque. He's an interesting card.
He is. I've got some proliferate effects in the deck, so when he dies and proliferates twice, that's good. And he also puts 2 +1/+1 counters on any of my creatures, like Niv-Mizzet. And he's a 4/5 flying trample, so it's not like he's a bad creature anyway.
Yeah, he's pretty good. Next up is Spitting Image. Copying things.
If ever you have thought, I'd like a copy of that, and I have too many lands in my hand, run this. Just once. Just once.
You'll make your opponents rue the day they played Magic.
That's not the intended goal, but it also works.
Yes. Next up is Collective Blessing. Hey, let's make that Niv-Mizzet bigger. And all the other creatures that you have bigger.
And I can draw with Niv-Mizzet.
And it's drawn with Niv-Mizzet.
It's hard to say no to things, and
if you can draw it with Niv-Mizzet, it's hard to.
It's hard to be unhappy with it.
Hey there, Sea Dog Productions. How are you doing tonight? I'm glad you showed up for this stream.
Nice to see you, C-Dub.
Next up is Ethereal Absolution.
Yep. This is one I'm kind of experimenting with. I saw it spoiled, and I thought, this card looks really cool. And then I realized I don't have a lot of decks that do the whole white and black thing. And then I realized I can put it in here. It makes my creatures bigger, not as big as Collective Blessing, but it also makes my opponent's creatures smaller and allows me to eat their cards in graveyard that I don't like and get new creatures for it.
Yes.
Seems good all around. It's worth experimenting with, is what I'm thinking.
Yes. And essentially it makes them a 2-point difference.
Yeah.
On everything. And if they're trying to win with a bunch of small tokens that are just 1/1s, they just die.
They are not going to have good luck with that.
Yeah.
Take that, Locust God.
Yep, Locust God feels that one hard. Next up is Treasury Thrall. It gets an artifact, creature, or enchantment from your graveyard back to hand, but it can also extort.
Extorting's not bad, and it's not a bad size, and it brings stuff back.
Yeah.
It's not bad at all.
It's not bad. Next up is Defiler of Souls. I saw this card, and I was like, you monster. Are you sure you don't hate your players?
Don't hate my opponents. It just needs to be a challenge. When someone beats me, they need to have a big grin on their face because it was hard. It's like beating a boss in a Souls game.
Fair point.
But yeah, this is just a big fat demon, and at the beginning of every person's upkeep, they sacrifice a monocolored creature. If you've been following along at all, you may have noticed there are no monocolored creatures in the deck.
Yes.
Why should I suffer downsides?
Next up is Casualty of Wars. Very flexible board wipe.
Yeah, it... Literally every kind of permanent...
Or it's not a board wipe, it's a very flexible piece of removal.
Yep. Any kind of permanent, I can just get rid of it. And I don't have to have a target for everything like Decimate does, which is why this costs 2 more. But even then, it, and this is a really good thing with Joda, because it costs 1 less for me, actually.
Yes.
But yeah, no, really solid, gets rid of things I don't like.
Yep. Next up is Merciless Eviction.
Also really solid, also gets rid of things I don't like.
And it's a board wipe for those things that you don't like.
And it exiles them so I can not like them forever.
Yes. Next up is Kaya, Bane of the Dead.
So she has a really useful set of abilities in combination. My opponent's permanents that I would normally not be able to target, I can target instead. And for 3 loyalty, I can get rid of any creature I don't like. And because it no longer has hexproof, it actually is almost any creature I don't like.
Yes.
Granted, this is Commander, where Protection and Shroud run around, but not nearly as much of them as people think.
Yeah. So, that's a really useful card. Next up is Cloven Casting.
So this is another one I'm kind of open to experiment with. I got it on a whim a while ago. It is a very expensive enchantment that makes it so that if you play a multicolored instant or sorcery, you can get a copy of it for 1 mana. You may have noticed there are a lot of multicolored instants and sorceries in the deck. So, you know, and there's lots of removal too. So double removal for 1 extra mana seems really good to me.
Yes.
Or double Urban Evolution for 1.
Yep. Draw 6, play 2.
Seems not bad.
Seems pretty good. Next up is Primeval's Glorious Rebirth. Gets all your legends back.
I have to have I do, however, have to have a legendary creature or planeswalker to play it, which, as this is Commander, I'm almost guaranteed to have.
Yes.
So it's not even a real restriction.
Nope.
And there's a lot of legendary stuff in the deck.
There's a lot of legendaries.
So should do nicely.
Yes.
I think that's... Oh, nope.
We have Tristani's Summoner.
This is another thing I want to be able to flicker. It's a 7 mana 1/1. For those of you who normally play Magic and are screeching at me, please don't forget, it also gives me a 2/2 with Vigilance, a 3/3, and a 4/4 with Trample when it shows up. It just has friends.
Yep. Gives you a collective power of 10/10 for 7. Seems pretty good.
It's not bad at all. Especially with something like Collective Blessing.
Yes. And then we are to your mana base.
The mana base we can probably skip for now.
Yeah, we can skip the mana base for now.
But that is the card list.
Yes.
Let's
bring up the stats.
So, I did something very different for this deck, and that is I took and basically brought the deck down through all of the different ways to look at the cards. At least all of the ones that I'm aware of. You have the name of it, what its card types are, what its roles in the deck are, and the roles, again, are stuff like removal, card draw, ramp, and there's 3 other kinds that don't get talked about too often. Those are standalone cards, which are cards that are powerful by themselves and still work really well with your commander. Cards that are enhancers and serve not as well as standalone cards, but they enhance what you're doing anyway. or enablers. And enablers are cards that let you get away with what you're doing. The protective cards are generally enablers.
Yes.
Then I've got converted mana cost, the color breakdown, which I use to get my lands set up. I've got the guild breakdown, so I can see what my chances of drawing each of those are, and their quadrant breakdown. Quadrant theory is another theory of deck construction. It's generally used primarily for limited. And there are 4 stages you will have in a game. They are the developing stage, where you're trying to set up your mana base, trying to get all of your things set together, trying to get your cards functioning. There is parity, which is where you and your opponent both have very similar board states, and you're trying to find a way to break through. Cards that are good in parity are cards that are creatures that have good evasion, cards that allow you to push through with evasion, that sort of thing. There's the board game where you are ahead, where you're wrecking face and it doesn't really matter. In Commander, it's a really dangerous place to be because everyone will beat you down if you're ahead too much and too often. But generally, anything's really good while you're ahead. I mean, the only things that aren't are things like Soul Ring, where you don't need the extra mana. You're already ahead.
When you're ahead, the development cards seem pretty weak.
Not as useful, exactly. And then there's when you're behind. Behind is when you're trying to catch up, you are not the strongest at the table, and you really need something to help even the score. This is where cards that bring multiple creatures into play, or take out multiple creatures, are at their most useful.
Yes.
So, a card that's really good in the ahead quadrant isn't nearly as useful as a card that's really good when you're behind or when you're at parity. And a card that is exceptional when development maybe isn't that great in the other 3. So that's another way to look at the cards of the deck. And I've got that for all the cards in the deck except lands, which, you know, lands are lands.
Yes.
But right now I have about 120 cards all put together. And in Commander, that's a no-go. Because your deck is only supposed to be 100 cards.
Yes.
So now we've got to make cuts.
Yep. So we're going to be looking at cards that are not necessarily the best cards, that will not make as big of a splash in the deck that we're thinking.
Or there are themes we need to cut down.
Yes.
So,
like we might have too much removal.
Yep.
Which, in my mind, there is almost never too much removal. But that's usually how I play. I usually play heavier removal. Not everyone sees it that way.
Yeah, for some people, you need to be the threat that they have to answer.
Yes.
I think the first best cut... I agree with you, Shanders. The Hedge Mage is not pulling its weight.
No.
Because of the way the lands are situated. And we kind of realized that as we were going over it, just kind of,
That's really tough to pull off.
Yeah, I don't think that's nearly as good as I'd like it to be.
Because I've seen your land-based, you're only running 2 of each basic.
Yeah.
So that's really hard to pull off.
And I'm not even running any shocks or lands that have basic land types on them.
Right.
So it's not going to help there.
That'd be a big difference, but...
Yeah. I also think it's a good idea to cut Joda, the Archmage. Do you want to bring back the sheet so everyone can see?
Yes. I will be scrolling pretty quick to find the cards that we are cutting.
Sorry, guys.
Sorry about that.
We promise we'll have this better next time.
Actually, I'll just do this. Joda!
Hey, alright. So since I can't actually draw Joda with Niv-Mizzet, and since his ability doesn't actually help too many of the cards, I feel it's fairly safe to cut Joda. Especially because he doesn't provide me with any card draw, ramp, removal, or board wipes. So I think Joda's probably a safe cut.
Yes.
Were there any other cards you or the chat noticed that are worth taking out of the deck?
Let's see here. There was possibly another one that I saw that I didn't think really made sense.
I'll spread out a few more, because Gavin has the luck of being able to look at the table where I've got most of the things spread out.
Yes.
So he can kind of see more clearly what I'm working with here.
Yes. Honestly, one of the cards that I think you could possibly get away with cutting, even though I know you kind of want to test with it, would possibly be Cloven Casting. It's one of those cards that has multiple types of cards that do the same thing, but better. But in this case, it fits your color theme really well. So I'm not sure how well, because I don't know how many of these instants and sorceries we're going to be cutting.
Well, the good news is, on my spreadsheet, we can look and we can see what kind of cards I have. So we can see the literal instant and sorcery breakdown of the deck.
Yes.
In addition to taking everything that way, if you move over to the side, I have totals of how the cards break down.
Yes.
So, let's see. I've got the roles cards play, the mana curve, the total guilds. Keep going down.
Yep. Card types.
Cards by type. There we go. So, I have 13 sorceries and 18 instants. So we're looking at about 31 sorceries and instants. Now, that'll change as we cut things, but that's still about a third of the deck.
Yes. So, that could still be pretty useful. However, looking at this list, Primeval's Glorious Rebirth might not be as useful because you have 11 legendary creatures, 5 legendary planeswalkers. And I don't know how many legendary lands you're running, because it doesn't list that.
Well, okay, you're right there, but probably because I don't have any. So, that seems like a reasonable idea. It's worth cutting the Rebirth. It would be fun, but it's not actually going to be as impactful as I'd like it to be.
Yes, because the Magical Christmas Land would want you to get all 16 of those things back.
Yeah, well, Magical Christmas Land is drawing Niv-Mizzet, and if we look at my guilds, we can see very quickly that I'm probably not going to do that, as I only have 2 Dimir cards, and what's my next one? 3 Gruul. Probably not going to pan out.
Yeah. Magical Christmas Land will be tough to pull off.
Yeah, but no, I agree. Primeval's Glorious Rebirth, probably not the best keep. I'm also not as big a fan as Bring to Light.
Because it doesn't hit everything.
Yeah, if it hit my enchantments or planeswalkers, then we're talking.
Yes.
But it's only creatures, instants, or sorceries. And granted, I have a lot of all 3 of those. But the things I'm actually looking for, and I was really hoping I could dig up my artifacts with it so I get that Urza's filter. But
yes, but...
Yeah. Exactly. So I think... So we're at 4 now, so we're, 20% done. It's good for a run.
Let's see here.
Anything else immediately jump out?
The Selvala kind of jumps out at me a little bit. Selvala is one of those cards that does help everyone by getting them additional cards. And considering how this deck wants to run, you want to be doing everything while limiting what your opponents are doing. You don't want them to be having additional resources to use against your deck. Because let's face it, your deck's going to be a big threat right out of the gate as soon as you cast that Niv-Mizzet one time. You're going to gain stupid card advantage.
Very true. I will return, though, that it's also ramp.
It is.
And it's also card draw.
Yes.
Now, I know it's a little bit of card draw for everybody, but as far as what my card draw looks like, if we want to take a quick look at those rolls again, I'm looking at... Looks like I have a little bit of extra ramp. You know what? Let's give it a try.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because your card draw is actually a little low.
My card draw is low, but my commander draws a bunch of extra cards.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
So
as we're weeding this down, what do all my stuff that needs proliferate?
that's a good point.
Because I've got the Huatli's Raptor. It's a 2-drop, and I've only got 22 drops. Whatever will I do with one less? But as far as things that require proliferate, we're looking at my Planeswalkers, of which there are 6, and Assemble the Legion?
Yeah, you can do that. And then anything that gives a +1/+1 counter.
Which I'm pretty sure is just
Yeah.
Roalesque Apex Hybrid. Which, again, now, granted, he's really strong as a 5-mana 4/5 flying trample. But if he's not going to help the deck, then it's got to go.
Yeah.
So as we are moving along, You're now down by 7.
One other thing that we're going to be considering, though, is because we did cut something that did card draw, we do have to consider that the commander is going to be reusable card draw.
Yeah, that's part of the goal of the deck.
Yes.
You know, I wonder... Because the other thing about the deck is it's supposed to get the commander in and out of the field very, very frequently. So it might be worth taking some of the enchantments that are supposed to go on it and taking those out. Because if they're going to fall off all the time for what I'm doing, that's a theme that might not be worth keeping.
Right.
Now, granted, it is some really fun stuff, I'm not going to lie. But in the interest of making the deck stronger overall, it's not a bad idea.
Right.
So if we want to take a look at the cards we're cutting up there... Oh, what do we got? It's just you look at your spot removal. I know you cut Hedge Mage, but that's still 12.
Yes. He's looking at the spot removal, and it suggests 5, and we have 12 left.
All right, you've got me there. I want to consider also that some spot removal is supposed to work in with the normal deck's strategy.
Yes.
Because 5 pieces, the games I play, 5 pieces of spot removal I don't think is going to get me very far. But I've been wrong on things before. But as we look over it, let's take a gander at that, and let's do a high priority on Exile.
Yes.
Because Exile's very, very useful. So that leaves us with Incongruity, Celestia Charm, and D-Spark out of that
and
list of regular removal. Oh, and Utter End. How could I forget? I think I want to keep Mortify because it can hit enchantments, which is super important.
Yes.
So we'd be cutting out Terminate.
1 and 10 is still enough.
All right. So we cut out Terminate, Dreadbore, and Putrefy.
Yes.
So there's another 3 points of things cut down. So we've cut down half already. Which, you know, kudos to us.
Yes.
This generally takes me way longer. This is like a 2 or 3 day affair for me cutting cards down. I'm real bad at it.
He sent me a message beforehand stating that he could give me reasons for 3 hours why to cut a single card, which we're not doing here.
Are you sure? Because I got time.
I mean, we do have time, but I don't think we want to sit here for 3 hours and discuss the next 10 cards for 30 hours.
Fine.
To be fair.
Okay, so we're cutting down some of the spot removal. If we take the theme of the commander enchantments anyway, at least, that's another 5 with Unflinching Courage, Fists of the Damned, Steel of the Godhead, Runes of the Deus, Tiana, Ship's Caretaker, and Bruised Harl. And I don't feel bad about cutting legendaries as much because we don't have the rebirth anymore. So there's another 5.
That's 6.
That's 6?
Yes.
That is 6, and I'm incapable of counting. But that still leaves us with the Behemoth Sledge, the Skyblinder Staff, and Marchesa's Smuggler.
Yes.
Actually, I think we can keep Bruce Tarl because he's a creature and permanent and sticks around even after our commander flickers in and out.
Yes.
So
I was going to say, Bruce Tarl kind of makes sense to keep that.
Yeah. So, spot on.
So now we need 5 more. And this is where it starts getting tricky.
Yeah.
Because you need the fine line.
Well, we did cut down a lot of enchantments and artifacts that I'm going to need to bring back.
Yes.
So we can take some of the recursion that does that specifically and take those out.
So that's 3 more.
That's Farika's Mender, which gets artifacts or which gets creatures or enchantments. That's Treasury Thrall, which gives them back on attack, so I'd have to throw it into combat anyway.
Yes.
And that's Hannah Ship's Navigator.
Now I was going to say, Treasury Thrall, you'd have to attack with it, and that seems really risky to do.
Yeah, especially when... Yeah.
There's a lot of things that are bigger than 4/4.
Exactly. So now it's kind of...
What are we running for board wipes?
For board wipes, we're running Gaze of Granite and Merciless Eviction and kind of Casualties of War.
And Time Wipe.
And Time Wipe. I'd forgotten about that.
So that's 4.
That's 4. That's
a pretty standard amount.
What's our amount say over there? 5? Gasp, I'm short. Well, we're not sticking anything in because it'll be impossible to take stuff out. So I might just be
out?
one short. Did we? I don't think we took one out.
No, we didn't take one out.
Yes, I was running short in the first place. What's my thing saying? I had 3? Well, we dug one up somewhere, everybody.
Oh, wait, it was suggesting 5, but 3. I think you counted Time Wipe as something different.
Either counted time or I didn't count casualties of war.
I don't think you counted casualties of war. I kind of counted that as spot removal. Because it's very targeted spot removal.
Yeah, but it's a lot of things.
It's a lot.
So what I'm going to do now, that's a little harder to do on the Excel sheet, is I'm going to take the cards I've got, I'm going to put them in a mana curve. While I'm doing that, can you explain one?
Explain why the mana curve exists?
Why it exists, what it does, why it's useful?
So, what the mana curve is it's a listing of the number of cards in each of the mana categories based on its number. So, how many 2-drops, how many 3-drops, how many 4-drops, and so on and so forth. The reason this is important is it lets you know how heavily you're invested in a specific mana cost. And being heavily invested in certain areas can be a detriment to some decks, but it can also be a boon to others. So we're doing this to find out what cards are going to potentially be disagreeing with this deck. Like, for example, Niv-Mizzet is a 5-drop, and having a bunch of 5-drops would not be a boon, because you have to choose between playing your good 5-drop in your hand versus your commander. You don't really want things competing with your commander a lot of times. Unless your commander's not really a key piece to the deck, which a lot of times the commander is a very big key piece.
Yeah. A lot of times when you build... It's called commander because you generally build around that commander. I'm also doing a further split where I'm taking creatures versus non-creatures.
Yes. I noticed you were doing that.
Yeah. Well, the people in TV land probably need informed.
Yes. He's doing this so that he can also help determine how many creatures he has versus how much stuff is just going to be buffing his creatures. Because if he is too heavy on equipment with almost no creatures, then there's only going to be really one creature he's going to be equipping to, which is the commander. Which that can sometimes pose an issue.
Yep.
So that equipment that's going to be sticking around, it'll be useful on any creature that's on the field.
But if I don't have a lot of creatures in the deck, I'm not going to have a lot of creatures on the field.
Yeah.
Now, granted, I've always got access to the commander, but he also costs more each time we try to cast him.
Yes. So the first time you cast him, he costs 5. If he dies or is exiled or goes into the deck for some reason, you can put him back in the command zone. And when you put him back there, he costs 2 more to cast. So eventually he'll be costing 11, 13, 15 mana to cast, and that is almost way too much to cast for that ability.
I don't know. Drawing 10 cards is pretty strong.
Drawing 10 cards is very strong, but...
But am I ever going to draw 10 cards?
Yes.
Okay.
Is drawing 3 cards worth 15 mana, though? Because that could happen.
You got me there. Okay, so on our second go through, my deck currently at 102 cards has 18 creatures. That's not enough. That's almost enough for a limited deck. So, I'm going to have to increase my creature count. At least as far as I'm concerned. Now, for the creatures we've cut, because they're the ones I have handy, and I don't want to have to run home and grab a bunch of cards and run back. That seems kind of rude to everybody out there.
All 3 of those.
Cool. Okay.
Oh, so Joda, that's right here.
Dang it, Joda. So, of the things I cut that are creatures, I have cut
most of your creature packs.
9 creatures out of the 18 cards. Literally half of them have been creatures. So, well, I've got a lot of really strong artifacts in the deck. So I think it makes sense to keep probably Hannah and the Treasury Thrall, because they can both get artifacts back.
Yes. Because a lot of your multicolored stuff also doesn't get artifacts back.
Very true. So, now I've still got to cut more cards now, but I have a better... I have at least 1/5 of my deck that'll stay on the field.
About the Selvala, we could cut a different piece of ramp for it.
Okay, let's cut the Commander Sphere. It's
Yes.
ramp and card draw that I'm cutting out for ramp and card draw.
Yes. And life gain.
And life gain, and it's only a 3-mana card.
Yes. You do have to tap it, though, so...
Yep.
But people are generally not going to be upset at that card.
Generally, no, they are not. Less of that whole enemies wanting to keep killing me thing. I think Izzet Charm, just as a general card draw...
is really weak.
It is, and its other modes aren't super strong either. So I think it's a safe cut to keep in for Treasury Thrall.
Yes.
Let's get this spread out so we know what my numbers of removing cards looks like. So there's 10, 11, 12, 13...
Back down to 3.
Yep, back down to 3. I think you're right. If I'm going to be cutting more things that aren't creatures, I'm also going to be removing my instants and sorceries. So Cloven Casting is probably a safe cut.
It's also extremely expensive.
It is a 7-drop and on the high end of the spectrum, so it probably shouldn't be something I base too much deck on.
Yes.
And with as few creatures that I have, I think it's actually worth cutting Fires of Yavimaya.
Although haste is incredibly powerful.
We all love haste here.
We all love haste in this playgroup. However, I do agree, because your creatures are generally going to be much smaller, because they're all mostly utility.
Yeah, so maybe the fires, as much as that is painful.
That is quite painful.
Now we've got one cut to make, and I can start looking at swapping things in and out.
Yes. Okay, let's see here. I almost kind of count Spitting Image as a creature.
Well, that's what it's going to end up being.
Yes.
So there's no harm in that consideration.
Yes. Let's cut Ashiok. No.
You can put forth that argument. I'm going to say that, sometimes...
You don't want your opponents doing stuff. You don't want your opponents doing degenerate stuff.
Yes. I should be the only one doing degenerate things at the table.
No, that's my job.
But if we're going to be cutting stuff down, as far as Planeswalkers are concerned, I think Dovin's actually the weakest I've got.
I think I agree.
He's not as strong as something like Grand Arbiter Augustin, where everything costs 1 less for my opponents.
One more.
It's just... One more. It's just artifacts, instants, and sorceries.
Yes. So really that's going to be turning off most RAM.
Which seems exceptionally cruel.
Yes.
I mean, I've got a Planeswalker that prevents hunting ramp, but any ramp seems really rough.
Yeah.
So, now we're at a deck size that is Commander acceptable. Of the creatures I don't have in it yet, there's one I would consider, maybe 2 I would consider trying to fit in. Actually, definitely just 1. So if I wanted to try to fit in Roalesque Apex Hybrid, what would be worth cutting?
Well, he proliferates.
Which isn't super useful here, but he puts counters on things.
Yes.
And he can put counters on things that aren't Niv-Mizzet, and they'll stick around.
Yes. You had something that put -1/-1 counters on stuff, didn't you?
I don't think I did.
No.
Oh, that was Fist of the Deus that did Wither.
Oh, that's right, and we cut that.
I'll bet Simic Charm, if I'm primarily using it to try to cast Niv-Mizzet again, isn't actually as strong as I'd like.
It returns one thing. And I feel that'll be stronger, because that can also help Niv-Mizzet win the game.
Yep. Okay. So,
Plus, with all your recursion, you can just keep buffing him more and more and more.
yep, that's true. So now we've got the deck put together. There are some changes to the way the mana base ends up looking, but all in all, as a 5-color deck, with everything being multicolor, that shouldn't change a whole bunch.
No.
So let's talk about the mana.
Yes. I will bring back the mana page. We don't need Joda.
In fact, we cut Joda. Joda, get out.
Get out of here. Nobody likes you, Joda. I really like Joda as a card, but not for this.
Not in this particular deck, correct.
He's kind of one you build around itself. Alright, we're down to the land.
Okay, as Gavin said before, I'm rocking with 2 of each of the basics.
Plains, islands, swamps, mountains, and forests.
Alright. Now, because of cards that do things like blow up all the non-basics and force you to search out basics instead, I have a small package of basics, but they're not what I'm intending to play most of the game with. So just the 10 will generally do fine here.
Yes.
I also have some cycles of non-basic lands, but generally in a commander deck you want between 36 and 38 lands, generally with a bent towards 38. This one in particular should have exactly 38.
Yes.
So, after the normal basic forest, basic lands, and before we get any of the cycles, I have a few kind of wild card non-basic lands that we're going to go through.
Do you just want me to start scrolling?
Yeah,
through
just
the lands?
scroll down.
The first one up is Evolving Wilds.
Evolving Wilds turns into a basic land.
Yes.
That's pretty much it.
It's color fixing.
It's color fixing. I'm
And
actually looking forward. There's a card in Modern Horizons. I want to say it's called like Perfect Vista, which has tap, pay 1 life to sacrifice it, search your library for a basic land, and put it into play. Not tapped.
Yes.
It's a fetch land for any basic.
Yep.
Which seems like it'll be really useful.
Yes. Next up, we have Gateway Plaza.
So, this is a gate. It'll add mana of any color to my mana pool. Those lands are at a super high premium in Commander, especially for a commander like mine, because adding mana of any color is really good.
Yes, and considering how diverse the color assortment actually is in this deck, that is incredibly important.
Yeah. And if I can get it played out early, I don't have to worry about trying to scrape the mana to do it later.
Yes. Next up is Path of Ancestry.
Path of Ancestry is one of those cards that adds mana of any color in your commander's mana pool. Color identity. Sorry. There's only a couple of them. They are most important in 5-color decks. This one in particular makes it so that effectively whenever I cast my commander, because I don't have any other dragons or avatars, I get a scry one. But I can look at the top card of my library, and if it's one I want to draw with Niv-Mizzet, leave it there. If it's not, I'll ship it to the bottom early and dig a little bit deeper.
Yes. Card selection is also very important. Next up is Reliquary Tower, because having no maximum hand size is one of the best things ever.
Especially in a deck where I'm drawing lots of cards every turn.
Yep.
This has no ability to fix my mana. It doesn't provide me any additional ramp. All it does is say, hey, remember when Niv-Mizzet drew you 8 cards? I got you back, bro.
Yep.
And I think it's worth it just for that.
It's worth it in decks that can do that.
Yep.
Next up is Blighted Woodland.
This finds 2 basics and puts them onto play tapped. They don't have to be the same, so I can just spend the mana and get any 2 of the basics I still need. Anything I'm low on, I can just bolster that a little bit. And that's what it's in for. It just keeps me flush.
Yep. Next up is Meteor Crater.
So this one is one most people don't know about, which is probably just as well. But it's kind of like the command tower, where it provides a mana of any color of your commander's identity, but this will only do that for permanents you have on the field. So if I have something that's got, let's say, 2 colors of mana in its casting cost, it's any of those 2. If I have a different permanent that has a different 2, it's any of those 4. And so forth and etc. And if I do drop my commander, it's taps for anything I need.
Yep. Next up is Grand Colosseum.
Grand Colosseum, it's like a City of Brass in that it produces any color that I want and hurts me, but it can also not hurt me if I just need the colorless. And since I only really need 2 colors of mana for any card, I can play around this needing to hurt me really easy.
Yep. Alright. Here is actually one of the alternate win conditions for the deck, which is Maze's End.
If you play 5 colors and you can live with the gates, it's probably worth slotting this into. This is the only other land that will not do any fixing. And very slowly, because I have no other way to dig out the gates in the deck, it will set them down one at a time until I get to 10. Now, because I have Gateway Plaza, I have 11 in the deck. But still, it sets up my mana. It'll get me 2 colors of whatever I'm searching for. And if people are not paying attention at all, I can win the game with it.
Yes. Most of the time, people are paying very close attention as soon as that hits the field.
Turns out people are really close in attention on the whole win the game thing. These are the guild gates.
The guild gates. Azuris.
White and blue, blue and black, black and red, red and green, green and white, white and black, blue and red, green and black, red and white, blue and green. They do the gate stuff. They can win me the game if I get 10 of them, and they fix my mana for all of them otherwise.
And this is a very pretty game.
Yes, it is. That is really nice. It reminds me of a gate set on Kamigawa almost.
Yeah. Next up is...
The Tri-Mana comes into play tapped lands.
Yes.
You may have noticed with these lands coming into play tapped, Gates coming into play tapped, Maze's End coming into play tapped, this isn't a fast deck.
No, it's meant to go into the late game.
Yeah.
But we got the Arcane Sanctum, which taps for Esper. We got Crumbling Necropolis, which taps for Grixis. We have the Savage Lands, which tap for Jund. We got the Jungle Shrine, which taps for Naya. We got the Seaside Citadel, which taps for Bant. We have the Sandstep Citadel, which taps for Abzan. We have the Mystic Monastery, which taps for Jeskai. We have the Opulent Palace, which taps for Sultai. We have the Nomad Outpost, which taps for Mardu. And we have the Frontier Bivouac, which taps for Temur.
And with that, the deck is all set together, put down, and set aside.
Are there any certain card interactions you're hoping to see in this?
Well, I mean, anything that flies with Skyblander staff, I'm always a fan of.
I saw that, and I was like, well, I think I know why it's in here, and it's kind of funny.
It gets the job done. There's no shame to be had.
I see a very, very dominant flicker theme in here.
There is a lot of that. Well, for a lot of times, for some of the more powerful kind of effects, they're attached to on cast. A lot of the Eldrazi legends, for example, and even just the big, strong, normal ones, have cast triggers. So you got to put them back in your hand. Niv-Mizzet's, though, isn't a cast trigger.
It's an enters.
Yep. So whenever I can bring them into play, seems like a good thing to do.
Yep.
So, and because I want to be able to do that more frequently, it also leads to me wanting to choose cards that take advantage of that. Mm-hmm. So it kind of snowballs. So if you see something your commander does well, you might want to look at other cards you have in those colors that do something similar and kind of snowball and build it out.
Yes.
Originally it was just Niv-Mizzet, and I had Miss Meadow Witch and Brago for the flicker, and then I realized that there was all kinds of stuff I could grab. Like Baleful Strix to draw me cards, Coiling Oracle to draw cards or get me extra land.
Yep.
Any of my Planeswalkers I can reset, which is something no one ever considers.
Yeah.
And now as I'm going through it, it's hard to find some. Findbreaker, the Golgari Findbreaker, will get me anything from my graveyard back to my hand.
The new flying dude that you just put back in.
Yep, the guy, he'll draw me a card and gain me 3 life, or, God forbid, the 5-drop one that will draw me 2 cards and gain me 2 life.
And that guy.
The Roelesque that we put back at the end puts 2 counters on whatever I want.
Makes Niv-Mizzet a bigger threat.
Yeah. And Tristani's Summoner at the very end provides me a whole bunch of tokens.
Oh, let's just add 9 additional power every time I bring that back.
Yeah, so there's a strong theme in there that allows me to take more advantage of cards that come strong comes into play effects. But there was also what is a non-bow, the combination that didn't work out, with the enchantments that needed to stay on my commander.
Yes.
Because if my commander's got to stay on the battlefield and wear some enchantments, it can't be flickering all the time.
Nope.
So
we kind of had to pick between, do we want the enchantments or do we want the ability to abuse the card draw? And generally abusing card draw is strong.
Yeah, abusing card draw is very strong, but also because the commander doesn't have any major attack triggers or anything like that, it doesn't make sense to throw him into the command zone as a main thing of the deck.
Yeah.
Unless, again, I'm building what I've heard referred to as outside the pumpkin. It's outside the box, but somebody wanted to be outside the box of the box, so they chose a pumpkin instead.
Huh.
But that is my Niv-Mizzet Reborn commander deck.
I'll go back up to the Civic Guildgate. It's pretty.
Okay, it's pretty. And I will probably be playing it at the local Magic Gathering thing we do in the community and see how well it does. With, 21 creatures? Board wipes are going to be a pain.
Not as much as you think.
True.
I tend to run few creatures. I tend to run the lower amount, and usually my stuff doesn't get hit as often.
Yours doesn't get hit as often because
I'm the one casting the board wipes most of the time.
We know what's up. So there's that. The Excel spreadsheet I put together, I designed it to be highly modular.
Yes.
So it's really easy to take what information is in there, clean it out, and put in new decks and see how it goes. You've got to be honest with yourself about the card evaluation.
Yes.
And there's another feature I think is really cool. There's a website called tcgplayer.com. It allows you to do mass entry of your cards. So if you take your deck, for example, and you say you have one of whatever this card is, and you just copy that over, you can paste it in there, and it'll run through and pull your entire deck out and say, here's all the cards in your deck at this set of prices. So if you want to, see if you want to price a deck all at once, done.
Yes.
It's really helpful, and that's actually how I got the price information on mine. And if you wanted to get yourself a copy of the same 120 cards, it'd cost you about $120 on TCG Player. So, if you want your own, let me know, either through Gavin or through normal contact with me, and you can see it yourself.
Yes. Otherwise, I also still have the Excel spreadsheet, so I can look at the prices there.
And start abusing an empty one for your own dark shenaniganery.
Yes, like the Jace tribal deck that will likely be my next deck. That's going to be super silly.
Indeed it should.
Except it has Jace the Mind Sculptor. Because I have it already.
Great humble brag. I see how it is.
It's a Jace deck. It has to have all the Jaces. Despite how bad they are. Some of them are. Like, Cunning Castaway is not going to be very good. Although putting a blocker out's pretty good.
It's never bad. I'm actually kind of curious. I was thinking about sliding in the Jace that makes copies of itself into a Nicol Bolas Dragon God deck.
Oh, no.
What's wrong with having copies of the Dragon God?
Actually, it specifies Jace Cunning Castaway on that.
It specifies this.
Oh, it specifies this?
Anytime a card refers to its own name, it says this.
Oh, no.
How many boli do you need?
No.
All of them!
We don't need that. So, against Nicol Bolas Tribal, Cunning Castaway will be staying in my hand.
Oh, silly Gavin. That won't save you.
I know, you probably run Mindslaver because you're such a nice guy.
See, it's really nice to have my opponents that I have. I really like them. Is there anything else we want to go about with?
I think that just about covers everything that we needed to cover on that.
Okay.
So, I'd like to thank everyone who showed up to this stream. I really appreciate all your support that you guys gave me tonight, and gave Nick, for all of your undivided attention, for building a fun deck. Magic is it can be a fickle game because there's so many cards and you have to evaluate each and every single card that you put in your deck. And it's hard to do. And I think having help with this helps out a lot because it can turn a deck that you would be like, oh, this card is going to be great. Then you test with it and it's like, this card did nothing.
Like Duergar Hedge Mage.
Yes. And then you have someone else who's like, oh, you're running very limited amounts of this. So is this card really going to be what you want in your deck? Just having an additional person build the deck with you helps out a lot.
And having everyone who was following along and yelling at us in chat helps out even more.
Yes.
Thank you all very much for your help.
The more minds, sometimes the better it is. However, too many minds can sometimes be like, okay, now I don't know what my deck's doing. Because this is like a hodgepodge of 16 ideas.
Which is why when you start, you come at it with a mission statement.
Yes.
What is Niv-Mizzet Reborn's mission statement? Drawing a bunch of cards, flickering in and out, and eating your face.
Yep. So, just having help can help with that. Having just one extra person helps a lot. So, I'd like to thank everyone who showed up tonight. If you aren't following me on Twitter, I do have a Twitter account that you can follow me on. I also have a YouTube channel, which I will be posting most of my streams to the YouTube channel. So, if you miss one, you can see us on there. Or see me on there, mostly.
Yeah.
But sometimes we'll have guests. This one will also be going up on YouTube so that you can see his Niv-Mizzet Reborn deck, because I'm excited to play against that.
I'm excited to play against you with it.
Yes.
Have a good night, everybody. Thank you
You
very
guys
much.
all have a great night.